you're here this morning. So before we start, just a couple of housekeeping issues. We received a lot of questions and they've been categorized. We won't be able to get to all of them necessarily. And they will be addressing part, at least the general view of where your question is coming from. And with that, I'm going to hand this off, and a reminder again that this meeting is going to be recorded. It's going to be posted on our PTSA tab in our school website. Thank you. So go ahead, Dr. K and Dr. P. I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself. I think you're gonna have to unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself? No? Lana, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to unmute Dr. K and Dr. P.
There we go. Sorry, I muted myself as people were coming in and then took my rights away. So I appreciate that. Thank you all for being here. I know there are lots and lots of questions. I'm going to do my best, and with Dr. Panegas' help, to answer as many questions as possible. Please know that guidance changed again yesterday. So if you watched the board meeting, maybe you heard about some of the change guidance. I think when they change guidance, it's difficult to keep up, but I also feel that they, all the changes that I've seen from just, during winter break through now have been changed to help kind of us continue to manage this. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going through the questions. I'm going to do my best to kind of answer them as thoroughly as possible, and we'll kind of go from there. And then Jean, if you and Lana can kind of help me fill in the gaps if I miss something, and we'll take it one step at a time. So guidelines for someone who tested positive. So here's basically the short answer of it. If you test positive for whatever reason, you have symptoms, it's your weekly testing for any extracurricular or something of that nature. As soon as you test positive, you have to isolate. Okay, so if you test positive, you have to isolate at home. That means for a minimum of, it's really 6 days, because you do 5 days from that positive test. So if I test positive on Monday, I'm going to isolate for 5 days. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I can test again on that 5th day, which is Saturday. I know it's hard to find tests on the weekend, so you can roll that into the next Monday, but that student cannot return to school until they get a negative test on day 5 or later. Okay. If they get a negative test on day 5 or later, they can return to school on day 6. Okay. If you take a test on day 6, you can return to school on day 7. The one caveat to that is if you have symptoms, no matter, if you're having symptoms, you really shouldn't even test, okay? Because your body's telling you you're still sick. But if you're asymptomatic, test again on day 5 so that you could potentially return on day 6. If you test positive on day 5 or you still have symptoms on day 5, we are really just advising people, stay out that full 10 days. So you test positive on Monday, stay out 10 days. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you would return that following Friday. Now, the only reason you would return later than that Friday is if your symptoms haven't subsided. Okay, so if your symptoms are continuing to increase, then you would stay out longer than that. But if not, we don't want you to test again on day 10 plus, because if you have COVID in you, as we've heard over and over again, it's going to continue to be in you. So this is where the Department of Public Health's guidance has changed, right? They were like, if you have it in you, don't test for 90 days. And then they said, no, test for 90 days. And they are back to their old rule. Okay, so this is where it is very confusing. Dr. Panegas and I were having a conversation this morning as she has been calling families that have tested positive, try to give them clear direction. Short answer, if you test positive and you have symptoms and you're out for 10 days, after those 10 days, you do not need to continue and go test, okay? As long as your symptoms have subsided and for 24 hours or more, you are not using a fever reducing medication to kind of keep your body in check, okay? I know that's confusing a lot, but hopefully after you hear it multiple times, it does start to make more sense. Jean, you're my barometer here, so you need to speak for the people. Do we need to add more clarifying in regards to if you have tested positive, how you need to address that?
Yes, I think it has, if you could, can cover who is considered fully vaccinated. There were some questions about being boosted and not boosted.
Perfect. Yeah. So no, great question. And I'm glad I'm here to answer that. So fully vaccinated, you are considered fully vaccinated if you have those, 2 shots, or essentially if you have the J&J one and you're in the first 3 months, and they originally said 6 months after that second shot, but now they're saying 5. Okay, now here's the caveat. I think all of you have heard from me. I'm a parent first. I've got 3 kids. I've got a high schooler, middle schooler, and an elementary schooler. My elementary schooler got their shots just before break. She's fully vaccinated, great. But my middle school and high schooler, right, their 6 months is up. Right. And it's hard because not all places are giving that added booster for a 12, 13, 14, 15 plus year old. You have to kind of do some hunting. If you have a child that has gotten vaccinated, but is beyond that now 5 months of that second shot, they are now considered not fully vaccinated. I will tell you, I know it's very difficult to find those shots. So we are working with families kind of in that caveat there. But my biggest suggestion is if you've gotten the vaccine and you're booster eligible, do everything you can to get that booster shot because it will protect you. That's what all the data that we are seeing now. I'm not a doctor, well, not the right kind of doctor to say that, but I'm going by the advice that we have from the county and from those medical professionals that they are advising get the booster if you are eligible. So if you are booster eligible and haven't gotten it, then you are considered not fully vaccinated, or they love acronyms, NFV, not fully vaccinated. So if you're a close contact from that point, you do want to test immediately and then test again on day 5 if you're notified of being a close contact. If you are fully vaccinated, meaning you're within those first 5 months of that second shot, or you've gotten the booster and you're 2 weeks after that, then you're only going to want to test once, and that's around day 5. Now, the reason I say around day 5 is the guidance says day 5. I have been here every single day. I've been helping with those lines along with a whole team of other people. And we know it's hard to get a test on day 5. So if you can't get a test on day 5 and you're a close contact, we would suggest around that time frame, right? Close contacts, we are really requesting families to do their best to test on their own because there's so many close contacts. We are relying on you to make sure that you test and that you are doing that in the appropriate time frame. We are focusing our attention on our positive cases and making sure that they're not returning early and that they are testing the appropriate time, that they get the right guidance. That's just where we are right now with the number of cases we're dealing with, is we're communicating to our close contacts, but our primary attention, and the LA County Department of Public Health supports this, is focusing on those positive cases and making sure they know when to come back, they're getting the proper treatment, and they know when to test.
Okay, can you also address not real quick, but we're getting a lot of general messages regarding positive cases in certain classrooms. How do vaccinated, fully vaccinated, vaccinated, unvaccinated, how should each of these 3 groups now respond? Great
question, Jean. Thank you for being my moderator. It's very helpful, allows me to focus on answering these. If you're getting a general notification, speaking as a parent, a general notification means you were just in a space with someone, not that you were close to them. No matter what your vaccination status is, I would not put too much merit in that at this time. If you're getting a close contact letter and you are either not fully vaccinated or unvaccinated, I would look to get tested ASAP. So you have that information.
Okay. Following up, I have heard where parents are notified that their child on Friday that their child was exposed on Monday. Yeah. Can you explain that drag? It may just be shortage.
Yeah. So I think this week we're at a better, but last week there was such an influx of testing being done. There was a clog in kind of every step of the manner, right? The tests were getting done, but they weren't able to report those to us. We were getting inundated. So it was a slowdown all the way through. It was not done intentional. It wasn't done from any shortage of work at any level. I will tell you, people were working 12-hour plus days every single day, including the weekend before break. It was just a matter of, there was such a surge of people that tested over break, people that tested the first day back, that we weren't able to get the data in a quick enough time to respond. I would say this week, Dr. Panegas, I saw her nodding her head. We were getting the information faster. We're notifying parents faster. I would say within 24 to 48 hours of that. But this is where all districts, and I've been in communication with other high school administrators and with Dr. Turnus, who's been communicating with other superintendents. we're all trying to do our best to keep up and get timely information, knowing that first week back, we got information, but a good portion of it was not in a timely manner. So we're trying to refocus our attention to focus on the positives and get that timely information out.
Okay, so when we do receive a letter and we do receive a notification, should all three categories of students be testing themselves? Follow-up question real quick.
Yeah.
And what kind of tests are acceptable right now? Home tests or et cetera?
All great questions. No, I like this question a lot. Hopefully this will help people out. So all three categories, if you are getting a general notification letter, I would not suggest testing. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that right now, due to the challenge of getting tests. If you have access to a test and that would make you feel comfortable, great. But knowing it's hard to get tested, general notification letter is not something I'm going to suggest testing on. And this is just being very practical, knowing how hard it is as a parent to get a take-home or online test or something, and then seeing the lines of testing here. If you are close contact, then yes, you do want to get those tests, especially if you are unvaccinated or partially vaccinated, or what they consider not fully vaccinated. And what tests are acceptable? Right at this time, all tests are acceptable. An at-home test is acceptable. A test through your doctor is acceptable. A test through our testing center is acceptable. We are truly relying on it. If you watch last night's board meeting and the board members and Dr. Trinas talk about, we are truly relying on our parents supporting us and helping make sure that they are following the protocols for their household and keeping kids home when they're sick and getting them tested on a regular basis.
Okay, what are the testing requirements if an unvaccinated child recently recovered from COVID? Do they have to still have to be tested for all?
I'm nodding my head because this is a good question. So here's the thing. Once again, this changed recently. So if you have a confirmed positive case of COVID, they have gone back to what they said last fall. And if you have a student that played sports or you heard these things, they now do not want you testing for 90 days from that positive case. Okay, so Sherry, your picture's on. I get to pick on you because you and I go way back. Okay, Sherry, unfortunately, tests positive, we'll say on the 1st of January, just to make it easy, right? She tests positive there. Maybe she has symptoms, maybe she doesn't. Because she tests positive there, and it's, you know, if it's an at-home test, I wouldn't put so much weight on that. But if you have a testing center test or you went to a doctor, you know, you have these more kind of thorough tests, Sherry, we're going to recommend that you don't test for 90 days. The only exception that we are going to make to Sherry is if on that day she's asymptomatic, sure, test again 5 days after to see, but after that, you should not be testing again. Because what happened is you potentially could be popping positive for that, right? Because it's still in your system. You know, you can test that one time on day 5+ just to see, because we do have asymptomatic people coming back on day 5 saying, hey, it tastes negative. It must have gone through my system faster. It was a false positive. It was a bad read, whatever. But we don't want those people testing that test positive on January 1st, like Sherry did, continuing to test every 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days. It's more important just to monitor your symptoms, stay home when you're sick, and then kind of come to school from there. This is confusing because they have jumped back and forth on this guidance. But what I just shared is the current guidance. You test positive, you should not test for 90 days. If you're a kid in a sport or an extracurricular or work-based, I would hold on to that proof of that negative test, either the email you get or whichever, so you can show that. If someone then later asks, hey, you're supposed to test this week because you're playing basketball, because you work at this place. But right now, that's what the county is saying. Don't test for 90 days.
Well, when can Sherry come back to play?
Sherry could come back to play as soon. She could come back if she tests negative on the 5th. She comes back on the 6th, or not the 5th, 5 days later. So it'd be like the 7th, right? You know, because you have 5 days from that first test. If she has symptoms, she needs to wait the full 10 days and then she could come back to play, as long as her symptoms have subsided and she's feeling good.
Okay, what about, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused about that.
Okay.
She tests positive on January. She's not supposed to test again for 90 days? But then you just said she has to test to come back to play 5 days.
No, so what I said is, and
Sorry.
you know, I appreciate you asking this question because, like I said, there has been movement back and forth. I will say it again, and Sherry, I apologize. I hope
I apologize too.
on all the parent groups. I just picked on you because you're right next to me in the Zoom here. So she tests positive on January 1st. Okay, And let's say she's asymptomatic, but she tests positive. Well, that asymptomatic kid that tests positive, we're going to definitely recommend you test again 5 days after. So the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. She's going to test on the 6th, right? Now, if that comes back positive, she can pretty much be sure that she has COVID. She is not going to test again from 90 days from that first test, right?
Okay. Okay.
You would test on the 6th, though, if you're asymptomatic, or even if you're feeling pretty good, just to confirm, because that may come back negative, and then you could return to school on the 7th and return to activities on the 7th. Does that make sense, Jean?
Mm-hmm. And so they will not need to show proof to the coach or anything, correct?
Correct.
It's all on our system.
Exactly. And what we're going to recommend is if you have that negative test or if you have that positive test, hold on to those records, because a coach, an employer, someone might ask, because I have kids that are working in jobs, right? And employers require weekly or whatever testing. Hold on to those pieces for your records, because then they can show that with them and say, this is what it is.
And this same rule applies to all three categories of students: fully vaccinated, vaccinated, and unvaccinated. Okay, great.
And I'll tell you that that rule applies today.
Okay. Let me get to another big category. So is how our kids are being educated, those who are being quarantined. And I think that because of the confusion and changing rules, many students are being quarantined unnecessarily.
Yeah, so what I'm going to say is, if you are a close contact, unless you're feeling symptoms, you need to continue to come to school. Okay, so if you get a notification of a close contact, now the exception is if you are a parent or of a child and you're saying, my kid's a close contact, I don't feel comfortable with them going to the school right now. Yes, stay home. But if you get a close contact letter, no matter of your vaccination status, continue to come to school. Okay. The exception is you don't want to be doing extracurricular activities where those masks may not be worn. So outside of the school day, whatever classes you have 1 through 6, come to school. Outside of that, you need to hold off for the 10 days before you attend those extracurricular activities. Sports, whatever things you're doing outside the school day, you need to notify coaches or program leads, whatever. And this doesn't have to only be PVP USD programs, right? If you're in a service group, if you're in something that you do independently, my recommendation is that you're only going to what you have to, what we deem critical, which is that in-person learning. Jean, I think there was another question there, but can you ask again?
I'm looking at all these questions. I forgot my second part, but in general, though, how is the school addressing students' education who are being quarantined? I know that live streaming is not on the table right now, so that's a huge question. Hybrid style, and can you also, second part, define the difference between independent study versus another?
Yeah, no, good question. I know we do get this a lot, so I'm glad it was brought up, and not surprised. Correct. Right now, we are not live streaming. There are lots of reasons for it. I know our teachers did a valiant job in the spring of last year to try to make that work, and I say a lot of them did it well, but it was a challenge for many, and there's lots of pieces that go with this. Right now, we are not live streaming. If you are out due to a positive case, we are putting you, we are doing our best to put you on an independent study, which basically we have advised teachers to put as much as they can on a Teams platform so students can access that. I know some teachers are recording lessons or having recorded lessons that students can access, but that's not across the board by any means. I know a handful of teachers that have said, hey, there's a kid has said, can I FaceTime into class? If a teacher allows it, great, but that's not something that we are practicing across the school. But it is something we continue to talk about, how we're supporting those kids that are out for 5 days or longer to have access to their education. So right now, what we are recommending is working directly with those teachers, checking Teams. Hopefully they're posted on Teams for the work they are missed. And if there are some online videos, great. If not, is doing your best to kind of independent study, meaning you're independently studying that work on your own. And you are doing that. That is obviously very challenging in many classes. And I know it's not a perfect solution, but it's where we currently stand right now. If you or anyone on this call is looking at, hey, you know what? I don't know how long this is going to last. I don't feel comfortable with my child being at school. We do have a DLA Academy, but you would commit to that for the remainder of the year, and it's actually a completely separate program. If that's something that you or your family is interested in, you need to start with your counselor and then kind of work from there. But that is a different program with different teachers and things like that. I have had a handful of people reach out to me just saying, at this time, that's what we so choose, and they are welcome to. But right now we're taking it 1 week at a time, trying to see, as the surge, hoping that the surge, as quickly as it has been going up, it will go down and we will be able to turn the page as quickly as possible. I will also say that I have communicated to teachers about knowing that this is a challenging time. Our attendance has actually increased this week from last week. I think a lot of people, due to many reasons, stayed home last week, but our attendance, the 3 days that I've checked for this week, has been significantly increased from last week, which is a good sign I see overall. And our positive cases overall have decreased this week. Specifically at Peninsula. That doesn't mean that they're going to continue to decrease. They may have a bump, right? We don't know. Like this, I can't predict the future, but I will say seeing more students in class is good with that piece. The last piece I'll say about being in class is I saw a question in there about masks, and this is kind of where we are as of right now. The LA County gave us 2 weeks to have all faculty and staff wearing a quote unquote medical grade mask, which includes a KN95, but also includes a surgical mask of that nature. These, and I will hold up an example because I have people asking questions here, like what is that? Hopefully by now you see a surgical grade mask. It's a mask that looks something similar to this. We have lots of these around. We have these in every office at every entry point on school campus. If for some reason your child does not have one, they can pick one up on the way. So at the end of this week, it's going to be required for all staff to wear a mask like this. Okay, you can wear a cloth mask with this. You can wear a higher grade mask, but that's what all staff. Students, it is recommended, not required, to wear a mask of this level. So families, you can, if you don't have access to them, we have plenty here on campus. You can tell your child, please pick one up every single day. You can wear multiple of these if you would like. But right now it's not required for students. Any mask at this time that's only required is any mask is required for student, not a certain type of mask.
Okay, thank you for that.
Brent, there's a few, well, can I jump in real quick? There's a couple things going on in the chat right now. Brent, can you specify on 2 items? One is participation in after school activities or sports if they're close contact, and maybe clarify what independent studies is and how it works for students that either are close contacts and feel they should stay home or are positive cases and need to stay home.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate that. So if you are a close contact and you are either unvaccinated or not fully vaccinated, you should not be participating in those extracurriculars until you have a negative test on day 5. Okay. If you're fully vaccinated, you're just going to monitor symptoms, and they recommend testing on day 5. But you can still participate in all those pieces. That's on a modified quarantine piece. I know that's a little confusing, but once again, if you are a close contact and not fully vaccinated, they actually want you to test and right away, and again on day 5. If either of those come back positive, obviously you need to stay home. But they are suggesting not fully vaccinated and unvaccinated stay out of extracurriculars for 10 days. Okay, a fully vaccinated can continue to participate in those extracurriculars.
So there's a question of here, the youth sports program, exposure management plan for youth recreational. Are we following those guidelines then that we just laid out?
Correct.
Okay.
Those continue to change, but yes, that's basically where that falls. The question about independent study, yes, if you're a positive case, a 5-day absence, depending on a weekend, that may only be a few days of classroom time. So you don't necessarily have to have an independent study. But if you're going to be out the 10 days, that's usually, that's a more extensive amount of school. So we will do our best to put you on independent study there. We also know there's a lot of people in independent study right now.
And there is some conversation about independent studies, and it's very possible my internet may get wonky because it's at Panther time. That usually happens because all the kids pull their phones out. But why independent studies cannot be live streaming or video conference. So that's between, that's just the district at this point, that it's not requiring teachers to do all of that at this point. The teachers are doing, I'd say a majority of our teachers, and Brett, you can correct me if I'm wrong, have done their best to put everything they can online, whether it's lecture notes, whether it's homework assignments, whatever it might be. They're doing the best they can to get everything online. But one thing that has recently been approved is office hours for our teachers, 1 hour, 4 hours a week for 4 days, meaning 1 hour per day, 4 days a week. So your child, or you can email or Teams chat your teacher to see if they are participating in those office hours, because then they can maybe Teams chat them, they can Teams call them, whatever it might be during those office hours, to try to make up for whatever they feel that they missed in class that they can't get from the lecture notes that are posted, or whatever they're getting from their friends. So that's what we're doing right now for that, in terms of independent studies and access to the teachers during isolation.
Dr. Benegas, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, we just rolled out. So there was an MOU between the district and the teachers union to provide those office hours. We sent that out to teachers yesterday. We have lots of teachers signing up. So we have an internal kind of spreadsheet. So we're trying to avoid all our teachers picking the same time. But what we've told teachers to do is to notify their classes of when those hours are, and to make those as available. Priority should be to students that aren't at school, that can't be at school for whatever reason, but that any student could access that. So this is a big step for supporting our students. It is an optional thing for our teachers, but based on the sign up, I've seen lots and lots of teachers take advantage of this. And those office hours could be starting as early as 2 o'clock based on their contractual day. It can't be overlapping their contractual day, but if you have a part-time assignment or whatever, but it can go all the way to 8 to 9 o'clock at night. We're hoping that more, as teachers do that, students will take advantage of that time and reach out. Teachers could offer that time to answer one-on-one questions, to offer reteach. There is a lot of flexibility there in regards to what the teacher and the students are needing. But those teachers should be posting those office hour times, both in class, in person, but also on some type of virtual setting like Teams, to notify students that aren't at school.
Awesome. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you have a 10 o'clock. Is Dr. Benegas able to stay with us?
No, I will.
We're able to stay right now.
I'm gonna stay as long as I can until I get pulled into that other meeting.
Okay.
So I'll continue to. I appreciate that, Jean. I'll continue to answer questions, and then if as soon as I have to get pulled, if Dr. Benegas can stay, then
okay. Well, there's a host of questions, but two that I really want to touch base on, so we do cover them, is mental health. There are a lot of kids with extreme anxiety, and the second question has to do with our activities for 8th graders.
Yep.
If you can address those two. And the third one is what happens when a student tests positive. And I don't support anonymous reporting of those kids, but if they are bragging about it and whatnot, how as parents tell our kids what to do?
Yeah, no,
those three things.
Not new questions, but all one. So first, the mental health component. I think mental health has been, there's lots of components with that, right? I think over winter break, when people were seeing, there was lots of feedback of saying, don't close our schools, with people also saying, close our schools, in regards to, I can't go back to what it was a year and a half ago, whatever, when the schools closed, that was too challenging for me. And now you have the other side of the coin of students that are coming to school, but are nervous about school and the feeling of, potentially bringing COVID back to their family. I understand those as much as I can. I don't walk in every student's shoes, but I understand that makes sense to me. It's not a perfect situation. I would say is if you think if your living situation is challenging enough where you are, ultimately very concerned about that, going through the independent study for the remainder of the year is the most conservative way you can go. And that option is available. And I would advise that if that's where your family is. If you're in a situation where, I'm hoping this is just a short term, what can we do for, 5 days or so? we have been trying to work with families and advising families to communicate to teachers to try to figure out what work they are missing. We do have an option of some capability of putting some students on independent study in unique situations. But remember, independent study is nothing more than pulling the homework from teams. There's no other extra support outside of that. So that's why we're saying first and foremost, communicate to a teacher if you are not there. And that's why we're encouraging our teachers over and over again to make sure they're posting somewhere where they're not answering the same question over and over again, right? That's why posting on Teams or something similar is the most helpful for both students and for staff. There were two other questions that you asked. One was about, eighth grade events. So right now we have postponed kind of open house into February. We have a couple of dates that we're looking at, but nothing finalized at this point. Our hope is that as steeply as these numbers have gone up, that they will come down and we can do something in person. So our plan is still to do something in person, but it would be in February, mid to late February. And once that is finalized, we would send that information out to everybody.
Okay, and understanding that the parents have to decide by February 28th, so it would probably.
We're backing that date up. Yeah, we're backing that date up to the first week in March. So it's going to be a shorter window of time that you have to decide after the open house, but that will be backed up. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And there was a third question, and now I can't remember, Jean.
It's about students on campus who are attending school who know they're positive.
So, we've had a handful of people reach out to us saying, I think there's a student on campus that is either bragging or that they have heard is positive and shouldn't be there. Those are tough situations. There are, confidential information in regards to what's going on. If you hear that from your child and you think there's some validity to it, you can reach out to an administrator, myself or other administrators. We have looked into a handful of situations that, and worked with those families to make sure we're asking the questions and make sure everyone's doing what is safe. That's why we were focusing the primary attention on our positive cases and making sure that they are not returning early. I think early last week, I think some people were confused. If you remember early last week, well, some people were saying, yeah, come back after 5 days. And so we were working really closely with families to be like, this is when you can, this is when you should come back. This is your optional time based on if you have a negative test or not. But, we kind of take those on a case-by-case basis and work through those. Up to this point, I will tell you, I don't have any confirmed cases with evidence of a student coming to school, knowing that they are infected and being here on campus.
I'm going to jump back to education real quick. And in terms of making up missed test quizzes and lab projects, how are students who are being quarantined able to take those and have it not affect their grades?
Yes, so that's going to be on a case-by-case basis, depending on the class, right? So a normal independent study, if you are out because you were so ill and you can't do work, okay, you're going to get time on the other side. If you are just out because you are isolating for a different reason, but you are asymptomatic, you are healthy, the expectation is that soon after you come back, you are ready to make up that work, right? Make up work in regards to tests, quizzes, labs, project, those things. That's going to be really a teacher kind of guidance in regards to when that happens. My hope would be that teachers would work with students and families for that matter and kind of communicate with them in regards to that, but there's not a guaranteed set amount of time for those pieces. And so my biggest piece of advice is start with the teacher. If you're having struggles with the teacher, maybe then reach out to the counselor and then we kind of work through it after that.
And that goes with labs as well. Labs are harder to make up.
Yeah, no, correct. And I would say, like I said, some teachers may say, depending on the lab, hey, this is something I think you can do at home. Some may say, we're not going to do the lab, you're going to do it virtually, or you're going to do some other piece, or you're going to skip it completely. But that's where I would start with the teacher. Hopefully you get information there. If not, reach out to the counselor, and then you can work in with the administrator after that.
Okay, so those are the steps for students who are having issues or discussions with their teachers. Start with the teacher, then the counselor, and then the admin staff.
Correct.
Okay. What if teacher penalizes? Are there penalties for absences, or should there be? Can you enforce that with teachers?
Yeah. So if a student's out for an independent study, if a student's out for their own isolation, things like that, No, a student obviously should not be penalized for participation, so it should be not penalized, not help or hurt them, right? So how you see that is, when I was, there's always a capability of just zeroing that out, meaning, if there's 5 points of participation a day, you're not going to get 0 if you're home isolating. You're not also going to get 5 potentially. You're just going to get a null grade. So it shouldn't help or hurt you. If teachers are missing that, or if, that's why I'd say start with that teacher to help understand. Sometimes they put zeros in there to help them know what students have missed, to have them go back and talk about it, because those are points that can be made up. There are all sorts of reasons why teachers would mark certain things there, but students should not be penalized for when they are sick, participation points.
Dr. Go ahead.
And sorry, real quick with that is, if you notice a 0 on a thing that seems inappropriate because your student was out on independent studies, start with the teacher, just ask them the question, and they'll be like, oh, you're right. Like Dr. K was saying, I just put that in there as a placeholder, whatever it might be. If don't feel like you have to argue with the teacher. So if they give you a response that you're like, well, that doesn't make sense, then go to the counselor. And if it needs to come to myself or the counselor and we can help intervene there, we will. So don't feel like you have to get in an argument with the teacher about it, but start with them, see if we can figure it out. And if it doesn't go the way you feel like it should go from there, then go to the counselor and we'll figure out the next steps.
Thank you. I like to dive in a little deeper in this, because I feel there's a lot of parent frustration and lack of understanding as to why, since teachers were able to Zoom and do online completely last year, why there's such a disconnect from this year. If some of the lessons planned were, planned for DLA last year, is there a way that we can bridge that? There's a lot of disconnect, especially with parents who saw this happening last year, but there's teachers who aren't, I don't want to say willing, but aren't able to do it this year. Can you explain that a little bit more to us?
Yeah, I'll say right now, it's something that has to be contractually agreed upon between the union and this district. And so that is where we stand as of right now. That can sound negative. I'm a parent, I get it. But that is an added duty. There was contractual language that did happen last year that approved that, but we are not there for this school year. So that is something that the union and the district as a whole continues to communicate over, if and when we get to that point.
Okay, so individual teachers do not have to follow the union agreement. They could do it. So that's why there's a diversity in the way in which teachers are teaching. Okay, and then you as an administrator cannot enforce one way or another. Okay.
It's not a requirement at this time. We don't have contract language behind it. I know there are a handful of teachers that have chosen to do that for a number of different reasons and in different ways. But that's where we are at this point.
So I suppose that maybe the best way for parents to advocate for their students is to communicate with the teacher. For example, could my student Zoom in or FaceTime another student in your class, or that type of communication?
Yeah, you could. It would just be prepared that answer could be no. And I think finding ways to communicate and ask the question of, when they are out, what is the best way? What's the best way for them to get the material that happened in class?
Okay.
I just got message. I do need to step in this other meeting, so I have a short time. Dr. Panegas, do you mind hanging around for a few more, or do you need to step up with me?
It's up to you on whether you feel like I need to hear the messages that are going on in the other meeting based on the distribution and everything for tomorrow.
For tomorrow. I don't know, I'll answer kind of one more question. Dr. Panegas, I'm comfortable with you hanging around for about 5 more minutes, but then I know that there was direct. So the meeting that we're stepping into is about the distribution for tomorrow that I know is very important. Everyone making sure we get those at-home test kits. And there's some critical information that's happening there because it's happening in such a short time frame. So please know that it's not a fact of I don't want to be here. This meeting came up last minute as of this morning, and I just want to make sure that Peninsula is ready for that distribution among other pieces. Critical pieces.
Okay, well, appreciate you doing that. Real quick, I want to touch on the subject of substitute teachers. I know that a lot of principals are acting as subs. We are short. Yes, you are. Thank you, Dr. P. On the Hill. So if you could touch base on that a little bit, the absentees of teachers, COVID and subs.
Yeah, so we have had absent, and it's a day by day. Some days we have all of our subs positions filled. Other days we haven't. I think administrators and other credentialed people have filled those positions. Fortunate we've been, because all hands on deck, we've been able to avoid having to group kids. So putting 3 classes together kind of in the, on the field or something like that. At this point, we have not had to do that, which has been great. But it has mean that people have been pulled off of other positions to, as a credentialed person, Dr. Panegas, myself, Ms. Sonata, Ms. Clovis, just to name a few of the people have done that. So that's something we continue to do, but it's, some days are better than others. Yesterday was a great day. We only had a couple, and the day before that was a little more challenging.
Good. Are the numbers, real quick, are the numbers being reported on the dashboard of the district correct? Or are they just basically confirmed cases, not close contact?
Just confirmed cases is what we're focused on right now.
Okay, great, thank you.
I am going to step away. Dr. Panegas, keep your phone close. I'll text you, but plan on going about 5 more minutes and then jumping on that other call. Jean, I do want to thank you for taking the time to put this together. Hopefully this information helped. I know there's still lots of questions. That we're going to continue to work really hard to keep our students safe. And I just appreciate everyone at home doing what they can to keep their students home if need be, and to communicate and be an advocate for our kids, because that's really why we're all here. So take care of yourself, everyone. We'll be in touch. Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, Dr. Panegas, I feel like we covered pretty much everything on, I know, amazing. Did you see?
Bye.
No, not so quick. In the chat, I wasn't able to monitor both. Are there anything in the chat that you feel like that can
I think I got to a lot of it, but if someone
I'm afraid
wants to put, but I think I addressed many of the things in there. I know there's continued frustration about not being able to live stream into classes, and I understand that it's our teachers are doing everything they can, from what I've seen, to bend over backwards to try to reach out to kids. It's just the work to make live streaming in a reality is just, it's a lot. And the good thing is we're seeing less and less positives as we're moving forward. Our surge is dying down, and we know kids are still out. The good thing is second semester is longer than first semester. So hopefully we have more time to make up what was missed during any sort of independent studies or needing to stay home or isolate. So I honestly, I guess it just comes down to Dr. K and I are always on the same page. It's like, I have faith in our teachers is really what it comes down to, it to figure out a way to get our kids caught up that are missing anything right now. And if that's not the case, then that's when you guys can reach out to the counselors. I can get involved as needed. Dr. K can get involved as needed. We can set up meetings with the teacher, figure it out. I just have a lot of faith in our staff to help us figure out how to get everyone where they need to be if they've been out due to anything related to COVID, especially in any realm really. But right now the concern is the COVID absences, I know.
Okay. I think in general, there's still some confusion. I think people are coming in and out a little bit as to what's DLA independent study. And with regard to independent study, that's when kids are quarantined and they are pulling things off teams and basically studying on their own. That could be whether they test positive or they're quarantined just for protecting their own family, right? Those are all excused absences. A parent can call in and say that we've been identified as a close contact. What if they just had a general note? Can they still be absent during that time?
Yeah, so any person that's absent, shoot, I can't remember the minimum days, but I feel like it's 4 to 13 days, I think, is the independent studies contract. If it's anything less than that, we don't bother setting up an independent studies contract. But anyone 4 to 13 days is considered a short-term independent studies contract. And so studying on their own, / if for whatever reason the teacher isn't posting enough or all of their materials online, attendance office works with the teacher to get those materials and finds a way to pass it along to the family. So it's about working with the attendance office to set that up. And again, it really depends on your students' teachers on whether you need help from the attendance office or you don't, right? Because you might have one teacher that's posted literally everything they do online and another teacher where it's like, yeah, it's hit or miss on whether they're posting online or not. So, but the attendance office is doing Denise was here on Saturday. She sent me an email on Saturday from the office. So I know she was here on Saturday trying to get all those contracts ready and doing all that work. So they're doing their best to try to keep up with the number of independent studies contracts we have. Anything that's longer than that, it's just long-term independent studies. And so it's just slightly different, but it's still through us. And there's any number of reasons why something like that would be set up. DLA is, I'm fully online for a semester. And that's through Apex, which is very, very different. It does not go through our teachers. It does not go through our staff. That is, at this time, a completely different program than Peninsula High School.
Okay, and that was a great solution too, to address some anxiety for kids who feel like they're not safe on campus, maybe that for long term. Okay, so independent study is a contract, and when that, so as a parent, if my child is out, then if there's not enough information online, I can, and we're talking with the student, the teacher first, because that's the first contact. Then we go to the attendance office, Mrs. Ball, to establish an independent contract. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then DLA, you don't need any reason to join DLA.
Yes, unless, like you have something going on in your family and the surge is concerning for your family and you feel like it's not safe this whole semester to be at school, then that's when you would look into DLA, but it's a semester commitment.
Okay. And then I want to go back real quick to the 3 categories of students for parents who may not have caught it. The unvaccinated, vaccinated, and fully vaccinated are those with vaccination and a booster.
So basically it's unvaccinated, not fully vaccinated, and then fully vaccinated.
Okay.
So fully vaccinated, eligible for the booster after your first shots, and you've gotten it. Or not eligible for the booster yet, but got your first shots. Not fully vaccinated is got your first shots, but eligible for the booster, didn't get it. And not vaccinated is obviously none of the shots.
Okay. And when those vaccination changes for a child, we let the nurse know, right?
Yeah.
As parents. Okay. So then they'll have that. So the student doesn't need to constantly prove on their screen or anything. It's in there. Okay, great. With regard to testing positive, I want to go back again, just in case any parents missed this. For all 3 categories of kids, if you tested positive on January 1st, as an example, you test again on the 5th day that symptoms show, or that you've been exposed. No, sorry. You test positive on January 1st, you wait 5 days and you test on the 6th day. If you're still positive, then you just come back to school and no need to test for 3 months.
So,
days.
Sorry. So positive on the 1st, that's day 0. So so like just as when you're considered a close contact or when you test positive, that's considered day 0. So when we do our calculations on 5 days versus 10 days, consider the first day of close contact or test confirmation positive as 0. So if you test positive on the 1st, January 2nd is actually day 1. So second, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. The 6th is when you would get your test, and the 7th would be when you could return to school if you're negative. But if you're positive again on the 6th, stay out till the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, come back on the 12th.
Okay, so quarantine another 5 days and don't test again, just come back.
Yeah, so you come back after day 10. So it's all about that day 0 being the date of exposure, close contact, or positive test.
Okay, I'm going to repeat this again because we got so many questions about this. If you're exposed, as an example, on January 1st, and you're positive or you have a confirmed exposure to it for a positive person, you test on day 6, actually. So it'd be January 6th that you test. And if you're still positive, then you quarantine another 5 days. So that's on the 11th. And if you're,
no matter what, as long as you're asymptomatic or feeling better and fever-free, you can return on the 11th day.
Okay, but if you have symptoms, stay home.
Correct.
Okay. And then do you need a test again?
No, so
you're symptom free.
For your positive cases, after you return on day 11, even if you have So like if you have symptoms or if you're feeling sick, stay home, but otherwise you don't test again for another 90 days and just keep record of your positive test, your first positive test, so that if you are in any program that's requiring testing, you can be like, no, but I have this, so I don't need to do that.
Okay. Lana, do you see any questions or anything that I missed or in the chat maybe? That while we have Dr. P here?
No, I think we covered just about everything.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I do want to, Dr. Panegas, I think it would be helpful for us parents to know how hard most of our teachers are working. I think oftentimes we focus on the ones that maybe we feel are not or slacking a little bit, or it's hard for us to wrap our brains around how come they can't just turn on the camera, you know. And I know it gets back to their contract, and it's frustrating that we can't make them turn on their camera or make them do certain things that we think could be fairly easy. Can you address their daily, maybe help us understand their point of view and what their day is like?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's all anecdotal, obviously, because, you know, I don't talk to every teacher every day. But I know the teachers that I talk to are not only trying to be as hands-on with the kids that are in class every day, but also answering Teams chat throughout the day. You know, their contractual hours are 8 to 3, but most, if not all of them, are answering Teams chat into the evening, answering emails into the evening, grading their work into the evenings. And I know that's true for every job, right? Like, I'm not trying to make them sound like they're the only people that work beyond their contractual hours. That's not accurate. I know that. But it's just like for the kids, it's been a trying couple of years for the teachers. You know, teachers get into this profession to be with kids, right? My husband is still a teacher as well. And he's been miserable, honestly, for the last year and a half, because the gratification you get is from the face-to-face contact, right? Seeing the kids learn. And so many kids had screens off when they were at home and all of this stuff. And they're just kind of coming around the corner from that and seeing kids on campus and getting that back a little bit. But, you know, still masks on and it's hard to hear. And, you know, I've subbed a couple of classrooms where I'm like, someone's saying here, but I have no idea who's saying it when I'm taking roll because I got their masks on. And you know, so it's a trying time, and as much grace as we can give them would be great. And if your child is struggling in a class because they can't get the lecture, I just really would ask that you just reach out to that teacher. What else can I do to make sure they can keep up? Because they will give you good advice. And maybe they'll say like, great, you know, can you Teams chat me or Teams call me from 3 to 4. Let's talk about what you missed, you know. And from what I've seen, most of our teachers are going to find a way to make that work and help the students out, because they don't want their kids to fail, because then I get on them and be like, why do you have so many kids failing and what's going on? And so it's like, they don't want that. They don't want the kids to be struggling. They don't want the kids to have low grades. They want the kids to be doing well. So anyways, I would just say, before just saying they're not doing enough, reach out to them. If that's a class in particular where they're struggling, just reach out to them, give them the chance. Most of the time you're going to find a positive result. And if you don't, then counseling office and me, and we can see what we can do to help.
Okay, great. Any idea when parents can be allowed on campus?
Well, we need a lot of help. So if all of you guys could just make sure to take the CBEST, so you can subs, that would be great. We need a lot more subs right now. So I don't know exactly. It all depends on LA County and their guidelines for when things seem to be improving and we are not as concerned about contact tracing and all of that. So obviously, if we could have you here helping us tomorrow with our distribution, we would. So the soonest we can get you here, we will get you here.
Okay, great. Real quick housekeeping, this will be posted on the school website under the PTSA tab, and maybe Dr. P can post it even forward because it's so relevant to and timely what we're doing now. Okay, so the other thing is,
Jean, we will send the link shortly, within a couple of hours of the meeting.
Perfect for everyone who attended, and for those who couldn't, we'll post and we'll share on social media as well. Thank you for sticking around. And I just want to say ahead of time, I know you might need to jump off, but all of us parents will hang out here. The board members who are here will hang out a little bit more, and we'll just process what you said. And if there's any other questions, I'll follow up with you and Dr. K. But at this time, I'm a little bit worried because there's still so many in the room, which I love. These are awesome. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and we will, get to that. If we haven't already asked your question or answered your question, I should say.
And there was a recent question about transmission and things like that. We're starting to do our work to see if there's any correlation. So there, correlation versus causation, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other right now to be able to tell that. We are looking at how many positive cases are in each class, and for each period, we are looking at that to try to determine whether it's whether it is from classroom transmission, or maybe those are also kids that hang out together outside. They just happen to be in the same class during first period, zero period, whatever it might be. So we're starting to look at that. We don't have any firm data on any of that yet. So that was one of the questions in the chat just now.
Okay, great. It'd be really helpful, I think, if you could talk about go into a little bit the process of independent study, because so many kids are being quarantined. They contact Denise. Is there a form that needs to be filled out, and each of the teachers or what does that process look like?
It's pretty straightforward for any of you that have done it so far. It's basically contact Denise. It goes through Mrs. Sonata, and she has made the form a fillable PDF. So we just email it out. Everyone that needs to sign it signs it and puts any relevant information, whether like look on Teams, we will email, have the kid contact me, whatever it might be. And it tells for each teacher how they'll get their work. It doesn't specify how to make up quizzes and tests, which I know was a question earlier before. But just like when students are out ill, basically, it's about setting up a schedule with that teacher. So you just contact that teacher. So like, hey, I'm coming back on the 12th. Can I make it up third period during lunch, or third period and go to the learning center, or can I do it at lunch on Friday, or whatever it might be. So it's just about setting up a schedule with that teacher for the quizzes or tests.
Okay. Okay, can you talk about boosters real quick?
So anyone so if you're eligible for a booster and you have not gotten it, you're considered not fully vaccinated. So yes, if you can get it, that way you're considered fully vaccinated.
And what does that do for the student when they're fully vaccinated versus partially vaccinated?
Lessens the not requirement, but recommendations for testing. So if you're not fully vaccinated or unvaccinated, the recommendations / requirements are test day 1 and day 5. If you're fully vaccinated, it's just day 5 and monitor symptoms. It's less testing.
Okay, got it. Did you all get that? Can you repeat that one more time?
So not fully vaccinated or unvaccinated, you test day 1, day 5, as long as you're asymptomatic. If fully vaccinated, the only requirement is testing day 5.
Okay, thank you. Oh wait, are there any other questions that we missed?
So there's just a couple of questions in the chat again. I think they just repeat that. So independent study is up to 13 days. Is that correct, Dr. Penang?
Say that one more time.
So there's a question about how long of the commitment the independent study is. And I think you said it's 4 to 13 days.
4 to, yeah. And then after that, if it's a long-term independent studies for another reason, maybe they're still sick, whatever it might be, then we either can do a new contract or we change it to long-term independent studies still through us.
And if somebody gets a booster, are they considered to be fully vaccinated 2 weeks after the booster or immediately?
2 weeks after the booster.
Good question. Okay, and then with regard to sports versus vaccination and unvaccinated, so if they are, the protocol that you just laid out earlier, do they still have to, sports teams have to constantly test, right? So they still have to be subject to that. And if it's constantly positive within that 90 days,
well, like we said before, just hold on to your positive test and show them, because they are being informed by athletic director, administration, that they do not need to test for 90 days after their first positive.
Okay.
What programs other than sports require regular testing?
Not at this time.
Okay,
I take that back. There might be like a speech and debate or mock trial, or maybe something with like band, but I don't remember all of the programs that have that right
Robotics? No.
now. I'm not sure. I don't think so, but I'm not sure. It kind of depends on, a lot of it has to do with masked versus unmasked. So if there's times where people are unmasked together, I'm sure there would be requirements for testing versus masked at all times.
So Laura is asking, is there a benefit of vax versus unvax or testing and participation quarantine for sports? I don't know if that is any different from regular school and sports. Is that right, Laura? You can jump in. You can, although I don't think I can unmute you.
For close contact or exposed, for close contact or exposed for participation in activities, you need to wait the full 10 days.
Laura, does that answer your question?
And this is regarding the vaccination status,
Mhm.
regardless, I guess, of the
I
vaccination.
do need to jump off to try to coordinate with this other meeting. Jean, you said you will get additional questions, and if there's anything we haven't addressed, that you'll bring those to us, right?
Yep, yep.
Sorry, I gotta jump off. Thank you guys. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate all of you and all that you're doing for the kids and your support of our school. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all you do.
All right, thank you.
Take
Thank
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so now I see ourselves as sort of this is our tribe, this is our herd. You can, if you want to talk, raise your hand. If you want to share, we will unmute you. And we're just, parents hanging out now, I think, right? You have any other, oh, here we go, Zabby. Are we able to unmute, or can you change that setting?
Yeah.
Thank you, Lana. Oh, I think we could stop recording. Thank you.